Hi, welcome to photo class. I am Pam Kriangkum. I am a commercial photographer and I teach small business owners how to take their own product photos. So this week for photo class, we're going to focus again on hero images. We're going to keep on rolling with what we were working on last week, but this week we're going to put a little bit of a twist on it. So what we're going to be doing is talking about creating those hero images again. So it's when you have those photos, those really standout photos where the product is prominently featured right in the center, or it's really eye-catching. And what hero images are meant to do is make you stop and look twice for any product or advertising that you see. So for this one, we're going to be focusing on specifically these product photos I found on Pinterest of handbags, and I tried to find really similar handbags. They're not all going to be perfect, but just to talk you through how the feeling of these images, like how the feeling of these brands could be presented by just changing the different backdrops. So let's get going. Okay, here's my screen. So here is the first hero image. We're going to look at this beautiful brown bag, super simple, super classic. And there's a whole bunch of interesting things going on here. So first off is when we look at this image again, it is on a neutral, mostly white backdrop. So you do have that bit of contrast. So you know exactly where you're supposed to look, which is the bag. And there's some other fun things happening here. They're using fabric, so that it's creating some movement. And what they've actually done with the pleats, which I found really fun, is if you look from the top all the way to the bottom, the fabric actually drapes in a triangle formation. So what that's doing is actually drawing your eye down from the top of the photo all the way down to the bag, which is interesting. And even how they have that strap position with that little bit of that arc and that swoop kind of draws your eye from that left-hand side of the bag over the strap. And then, you know, in that like little squiggle motion that the handbag strap is sitting on. And then it's also sitting on a pillar, so it is a bit more elevated. So I found this to be a really nice, simple, clean product photo that also conveys a lot of stuff in it, with just like how they've draped the fabric and the movement that they've created in the bag. Makes it a bit more stand out than just like a product photo of this bag, maybe just on a seamless paper, which we may still need for listing photos. Those photos are still important, but this one adds in a little bit more context. And even with the fabric they're using, it's probably like, it's a matte finished fabric, so maybe it's like a linen or a rougher texture or something like that. So it kind of calls into something that's a little bit more relaxed, natural, and may speak to the kind of audience that they are trying to connect with, versus using something that's like a satin luxe kind of fabric, something really polished. Stuff like that will resonate with somebody else. So let's compare this one of this bag with this really simple backdrop with the fabric and the draping with this next example. Oh, my Pinterest feed. Give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. Much better. Okay, so for this next one is super simple and very similar. Again, it is a brown bag. This one I think is actually a backpack, but now it's sitting on like a marble-esque kind of backdrop, and the light's coming in from a different angle. So with this one, it does even feel a little bit more sleek to me, a little bit. I almost want to say colder, and I don't mean cold in the sense of it's not approachable, but colder in the sense of it's not bringing the same feelings of like those warm kind of feelings that I would have felt looking at that first bag that was on a fabric backdrop, or this one is on that marble, it's on that stone, and that also brings in this idea and feeling of luxury. So that's what I'm feeling, and that's what's being evoked here. And then they do some really fun things with the light and shadows coming in. So then using things like diagonal lines, leading lines, and what that's doing is that's creating tension throughout the image. So when you're looking at the image, the light coming in from the right-hand side with the shadows hitting the bag and stuff like that, that's creating a diagonal line for your eye to be drawn straight down back to the middle of the bag. So I just wanted to give you the example of the two. So let's go back and look at that first one again. So here where it does feel a bit softer, it does come down to the lighting as well, because this one doesn't have any direct light. So it is a bit of a softer image. It has a softer feel because of the fabric and the draping. Where this image here, because of the textures of the backgrounds they're using, as well as how they're using light, because something that has a bit more of a contrasty light to it when you're taking product photos will always have, what I find when I'm looking through ads and examples, is more of an elevated and almost editorial feel to it, versus when you don't have the shadows present and lower contrast. We'll look at one more example here. And so this is an example of something that is a little bit lower contrast, and even within the colors that they chose for the photos, it's super low contrast as well. This is also bringing in a whole nother feeling, because this is actually more of a lifestyle product photo. We're seeing it pretty much in a way that you would maybe use it every day. It's maybe bringing to mind someone who has this at the front door, they have a lamp, they like natural dried goods, things like that, where you see the flowers on the right hand side. So it is bringing in those natural elements, a little bit more grounded, down to earth. And you see that with all the tones of the colors chosen of the furniture in this. So then the bag that's going to be placed here mirrors that as well. So it's almost like somebody had placed this bag ready to go, or they just got home and they've left it here. And then so this is also, speaking to a different audience than maybe what would have been with this one, right? Where this one feels a little bit more editorial, just because of how they've used the lighting, and more of just like something that could be like a standard product photo. Whereas this one, with this image being more lifestyle, and we've brought in some other props here, you're calling in even more of the lifestyle feel, where you're like, okay, like what is someone who would like this bag? How would they live? Where could they see it? So then when it reaches that target audience, like, oh, like this kind of looks like my ideal setup that I would have in my home. So yeah, like a bag like this totally makes sense for the kind of lifestyle I live. Okay, so this one's going to be really quick, today's photos class. I'm going to try to make all these little lessons quick and easily accessible, so you can get on back to what you were doing before. So we have one more example, and it's this fun woven bag. I have two examples. You've already saw the other one, but for this one, again, it's a really nice take on a product photo that's a little bit more than standard. It gives a little bit more context, as well as a bit more texture, because this is like a really textured bag. So you see it sitting on a table, which it does make sense to have it on a table, because that's maybe where you would find it at home. But then they're also using a little bit of shadow to actually, when you see it, it's creating a frame within a frame in this image. So what the shadows are doing is framing the bag. And then you have the bag sitting there. The light source is coming from the right hand side. They're either using it could be sunlight, but I really think this one is artificial, like a strobe. In a professional studio, that's what this lighting looks like to me, because of the angle that it's coming down at. But this is kind of an example to me, like because of the backdrop and the material of the bag, as well as the table, it kind of reminds me of like, oh, like this is like a bag that I want to bring to the beach, or maybe I'm going on vacation and we're going out for a night. This is kind of like the bag that I would want to grab and go and use. And you have to remember all these conversations that are happening as you're building these photos. These are all like subconscious kind of things that are happening in your customer or consumer's mind. But let's switch to the other photo now of this one, which is the bag is fairly similar, where it is that woven material. But do you notice how just changing the backdrop of the two bags, I realize they're not perfect example matches, but like pretend they are. Do you see how putting this bag here now and having this different background changes the context of maybe who it is that would buy it, as well as the kind of lifestyle that would kind of go with it? So for this one, I believe this one is direct sunlight just from above, because it is outdoors. Never know though. And this to me, because you look in the background, you see this valley, you see the open blue skies, it's bright, you have the woods, and you have that textured material again. Instead of thinking, oh, we're at the beach, it's going to be the grab and go bag I take with me when I'm going out for the night. This to me brings more of like that cottage core feel of like that cozy, like girl in a meadow like living her best Sound of Music life kind of thing. Like that's the kind of thing that I'm feeling when I look at this bag of like who is the kind of person who would gravitate towards that, right? Like someone who like envisions that lifestyle for themselves. Maybe it's a little bit slower, things like that, versus the other photo. If we go back to where it's more neutral, but because of that sandstone texture, it automatically for me just made me think like beach bag and things like that. So this one was a really quick little photo class, but I just really wanted to show how just with one or a very similar product in a few different scenarios of just how the backdrop of everything changes the feeling and the perception of who would potentially purchase your products, as well as the kind of brand that you are. So that is it for today. A super quick little photo class. I hope you enjoyed it though, and that you got a lot out of it. Let me know what you think. I'm always just open to hearing your thoughts on it, and new topics to cover all the time. But yeah, I will see you here next week, same time. I will see you then.